20-year-old Jelena had just started living her life in Sweden when she was found brutally murdered in her au pair family's house. Her murder would soon reveal a twisted love story when it turned out that a man had been having feelings for Jelena that were not answered and instead turned into a deadly obsession. A lot of question marks still remain about what truly happened that Easter Sunday, but one thing is for sure. Today, Jelena is gone and her murderer walks free. This is the case of Jelena Ivanisevic. So hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Elin and on this channel I cover true crime cases that have occurred in the Nordic countries. The only content warning for this video is sexual assault, and I also mention mental health problems, so if that's something that you don't want to watch, then I suggest you click out of this video right now. I'm also using natural light today because, to be honest, it's a lot better for my eyes, so hopefully it's not too disturbing, and let's see what we feel about that. This case angers me a lot, and it actually hasn't gotten too much coverage, even though it's a pretty disturbing case and the sentencing is just mind-blowing. Anyway, I'm not gonna talk more and instead just jump straight into the case that happened in Sweden. Jelena Ivanisevic was a 20-year-old girl originally from Croatia who was born in 1987 to her parents, and she also had an older brother. When she was a child, her and her parents moved to Germany for several years due to the Yugoslav wars, and after her family moved back to Croatia, her parents got divorced. So she then moved with her father to the small town of Ogulin, located in the center of Croatia. This was a very small town with only around 15,000 residents, but Jelena would end up spending a big part of her childhood there. She went to school and later became an industrial student with dreams of becoming a journalist, and she also had dreams of studying abroad. She's been described as academically gifted and she did well in school, but she was, however, not very confident in herself. Jelena was described as beautiful, intelligent, and shy, and according to her friends, she was always in a good mood. She was a good person who was a bit naive when it came to judging people's characters. On top of that, she was a devout Catholic and a virgin, even though she did enjoy flirting a bit. At some point in her life, Jelena moved temporarily to Sweden to study and work after being accepted to the Institution of Cultural Science at Gothenburg University. In Sweden, she mostly spent her days studying, working, or spending time with her friends. She worked as an au pair for a rich family who lived in a luxury villa in a pretty wealthy area, and she took this job very seriously. The father of the household was the director of a property company, and therefore Jelena was allowed not only to live with them, but also eat, and she got an allowance in exchange for her work. She was mostly looking after their child and helping in the household, and she was well liked by the family who trusted her. Jelena herself also enjoyed this job. I mean, she got her own room, and even if it was in the basement, it was nice and spacious, and she got her own entrance and bathroom. In fall of 2006, she started her Scandinavian Studies, which is a basic education in society and culture in Sweden and Scandinavia. The course was in English and it was aimed at international students. But in this course, Jelena unfortunately met a man that would change her life. Venkateshwar Pula Gurla was born and raised in rural South India to loving and overprotecting parents. He was their only child and his parents had saved for years for Venkateshwar to be able to study abroad. In 2005, 24-year-old Venkateshwar arrived in something that felt like a completely different world. He moved to a small town in Västergötland where he started studying molecular biology at the local university. But he actually had a hard time following the lectures in English, and he ended up abandoning his plans to finish his bachelor's degree after only a few months. In 2006, Venkateshwar moved to another city, the city of Gothenburg, that was a lot bigger than the previous one. He actually managed to find 2 jobs there, one in a bar and another in a strip club where he was cleaning and doing dishes. Venkateshwar felt super guilty towards his parents because he had abandoned his studies and they were the ones who had paid for it. So he instead decided to enroll in a course about the Scandinavian culture at the university. This was a course to introduce foreigners to Sweden and make their life easier, and remember who else was in this course. This was where Venkateshwar met slender and dark-haired Jelena Ivanisevic. According to other classmates, Venkateshwar was acting normally at first. Yelena and Venkateshwar lived in the same neighborhood, so they often bumped into each other on the way to the university, and Yelena was a trusting person who kinda talked to everyone. So Venkateshwar managed to win Yelena's trust even though she was overall very shy when it came to men. But Venkateshwar soon fell in love with Yelena, and he started talking about her to others as if they were in a relationship. He told others that she was someone that he loved and that he met a lot. Venkateshwar actually abandoned his Scandinavian studies course around Christmas time, but he was still texting and calling Yelena regularly. According to him, they had been hanging out a lot both in his home but also in cafes around town. But the situation was a bit different from Yelena's perspective and, to be honest, from everyone around them as well. To her, Venkateshwar was just an acquaintance and she was actually in love with someone else. Yelena's friends also backed this up by saying that she would never be able to keep quiet about the relationship. So it seems like this was more in Venkateshwar's own imagination, and maybe he lied to himself because he was so obsessed with her. In 2007, Yelena's au pair family was traveling to Africa for a vacation during the Easter holiday. They offered for her to join them, but she decided to take some time off and just stay alone in their house. Around this time, Yelena also got the good news that she could stay in Sweden for another 3 months to improve her Swedish. Her dad remembers her calling him hysterically and asking if she could stay, and he said yes because according to him, she had deserved it. On the 8th of April 2007, Venkateshwar showed up at Yelena's house, and it's unclear if he was invited or uninvited, but most people seem to believe that he was not invited. Since her au pair family was on holiday, the house was empty, and this was the first time that Venkateshwar ever visited the house. They ate some pancakes, drank beer, and was watching some TV. During the evening, Venkateshwar and Yelena had sexual intercourse, and it's also unclear if this was consensual from her side, but considering the details in this case, most people, including me, seem to believe that it was not consensual and that she was raped. Unfortunately, this Easter Sunday would be the last time that Yelena was ever seen again. 5 days later, on the 13th of April, one of Yelena's friends called the emergency services as no one had heard from her. Yelena had also not attended any of her lectures in school, and the police sent a car to the villa to make a welfare check. From the outside, everything looked normal, but they decided to force themselves inside just to check that everything was alright. When they came inside, they were met with a bad smell coming from the basement, so they of course went down there to check. Yelena's room was tidy and clean, very organized and undisturbed, but her bedsheets and duvet were missing. These were found inside the washing machine that had been set to 90 degrees but never been put on and started. In the bathroom, behind a frosted glass door, Yelena's body was found. She was laying on her stomach on the bathroom floor, and she was dressed in only underwear and a t-shirt with her hands handcuffed behind her back. Her fingers were spread and pointed at the ceiling, and she had a discoloration of her skin that can happen after death and indicated that her body had been dead for several days. She died from asphyxiation, and it was believed that her nose and mouth had been covered. Yelena had, however, been fighting back as her body showed signs of a struggle. Traces of sperm were found on Yelena's body and in her room as well. Watches, jewelry, and 2 laptops had been taken from the house, so the person responsible for her death had been going through the villa and stolen from it. Before leaving, the bathroom door had been shut and locked behind him. The police searched Yelena's phone and pretty soon found out who she had been in contact with. Of course, Venkateshwar's number came up many times, and for some reason he stopped trying to reach her on Sunday, the 8th of April. They also realized that Venkateshwar was not unknown to the police, as there had been 2 earlier allegations of rape and just other claims against him. A year before Yelena's death, a young girl reported Venkateshwar for rape to the police. She claimed that it had happened in a bathroom at Venkateshwar's workplace and that he had followed her when she went to the toilet, forced the door open, and raped her. He had also taken a photo of her on his phone, and even though he denied these charges, he was convicted of rape in the end of 2007. Only a month before Yelena's death, Venkateshwar met a 14-year-old girl at a bus stop and started chatting with her. He then asked her to help him with a job application, and they agreed to meet the following day at his house. But she brought a friend along, and good for her, since she was clearly a smart girl that did not just go alone to this random man's house. Venkateshwar had shown them porn and his collection of sex toys, and they had been drinking wine and doing some drugs. They later went to the strip club where he was working, but one of the girls started feeling sick, so she went home. She later believed that he had spiked her drink with something and reported this to the police, but it seems like the case was dismissed in court. So when the police now questioned Venkateshwar, he seemed cheerful and like he was in a good mood. He claimed that he had been shopping on the day that Yelena died, but the investigators were not convinced. They had found Yelena's digital camera in his home as well as a public transport card registered in her name. His phone data showed that he had been using this card to travel public transport, so things were not looking good for him. They also found one of the stolen laptops at his home and the other one in one of his friends' houses. So basically he was now forced to make a confession, and he told the police that Yelena and him were a couple and that they had consensual sex that night. After Venkateshwar had cuffed her hands behind her back, she started screaming since she did not want this, so he sat on top of her and put his hands over her mouth and nose until she stopped screaming. He then realized that she was dead, so he carried her body to the bathroom where he left her laying on the bathroom floor. He then turned the lights off, locked the bathroom door from the outside, and then went through the house looking for valuables. But Venkateshwar soon changed his story, and he actually did this several times. He now tried to claim that he was mentally ill and that he did not know what he was doing. According to a mental evaluation, he was not suffering from any mental illness, but he was described as emotionally underdeveloped. Venkateshwar also admitted to abusing Yelena until she died, but he claimed that he did not mean to kill her. He just wanted to make her quiet and did not intend to kill her, and he did not call the police because he was scared since she had her hands cuffed behind her back. So the case went to trial in 2007, and Yelena's family traveled to Sweden to attend the trial. Yelena's father has described this as super hard and painful, especially when one of Venkateshwar's family members laughed him straight in the face inside of the courtroom. And I don't even have words for that kind of behavior, honestly. It's just so disrespectful and it makes me so angry, but it does kind of explain why Venkateshwar turned out to be just an evil man, because these are the kind of people that he grew up with. The prosecution wanted a life sentence for Venkateshwar. He actually created a bit of chaos in the courtroom since he was behaving strangely and seemed confused and also broke down in the courtroom. Venkateshwar actually screamed to the judge that he wanted to die because he was a heinous criminal, and he also stated, and I quote, "Hang me like Saddam Hussein, I don't want to live, do something." An investigation into his background showed that he was immature, had a weak ego, and was sensitive to stress, but as I said, the mental evaluation did not show that he suffered from any mental illness. The court and the appeals court both claimed that they could not give him a life sentence as the criteria for this had not been met. And I'm not really sure why, to be honest, as he had shown previous dangerous behavior towards women and then ended up raping and killing someone. I just feel like that's a pretty heinous crime, and it shows that he is capable of repeating his actions. According to the court, a life sentence shall only be given in very serious and heinous crimes or in cases with many victims, so they just did not see Yelena's murder as brutal enough. Venkateshwar was therefore sentenced to 11 years in prison for murder and rape, and would also be deported from Sweden as soon as he had served this sentence. He appealed because he did not think that he was guilty of murder, but this was denied. Yelena's body was flown back to Croatia, and her father arranged for her to be buried at the cemetery in her hometown. Her father has later strongly criticized the Swedish legal system, as he thinks that the sentence was not enough for what he did. He has also described his whole world falling apart after what happened to his daughter, as he used to live a regular life before Yelena's murder, but actually ended up having a heart attack and has never really gotten back to work life after this. Venkateshwar was later moved to a prison specialized for people who commit sexual crimes, and he had to undergo treatment for addicts. In December of 2008, he set fire to the mattress in his cell and started a fire, so people had to be evacuated. He and another inmate was taken to the hospital, but they did not really have severe injuries. For this, he was sentenced to 18 more months in prison for arson, but he himself claims that the fire was a suicide attempt. In prison, he has overall been struggling with his mental health, and he has also been threatening prison officers. Venkateshwar was able to apply for parole after serving 2/3 of his sentence, so on the 13th of August 2015 he was released on parole and taken straight to the airport. He was then 33 years old and sent back to India to continue his life as if nothing ever happened. But that's all that I have for this case today, so I'm just gonna wrap up the video here. If you like this video, please subscribe and hopefully I will see you in my next case. Goodbye everyone.